What's going on, guys? Hit pause here with a pretty fun tutorial for Unreal Engine 4, and what I've got here is a character that I can run around with. So this is Hit Pause signing off. Thanks for watching. Just kidding. Okay, so if I run to the edge here and I run around, nothing weird, but I can jump and ragdoll. Okay. And I can come out of ragdoll, although that was glitchy. It's not perfect. There's some bugs that I'd like to fix. See, I can move around him, I can let him go, and he kind of jumps back up. Okay, I can nose dive into some blocks. It can get glitchy. It can launch him or the boxes here and there. As you can see, I launched the boxes really far. The ragdoll itself's not that tuned or anything. I pretty much can't control him while I'm holding it down. I think I'm probably going to change it to tap on, tap off. But if this were like a game or something where you were supposed to launch yourself into shit, I wouldn't. I would just make it so that all you could do is launch yourself. You couldn't do anything else. But you'll notice that the camera actually follows the ragdoll here, so it follows it down. Even though I can't move or anything like that, it will follow him down to his death. Okay, so he can eat shit like that. He's pretty ragdolling there. Again, the physics asset's not perfect or anything like that. I didn't spend a lot of time on that. It's not really important. I did run into a lot of issues doing this. Here's the whole thing. It's a little extensive. It's not too bad. This right here is actually a completely separate method, and I'm going to highlight a bug on that that I think is associated with these two nodes working in tandem, because there's two ways to do this. One, you completely detach the mesh from the capsule, and then you go ahead and realign those two things when you come out. The other way is to not detach it, rather run simulation on the capsule, and that way the body stays attached to it, and then you can just blend out. Now there's bugs associated with both of the methods that I'm showing here, and I haven't figured them out yet, but I may or may not do an updated video or something if I ever figure them out, and that's a big ass if. I'm probably going to post some questions in the UE4 answer area if I can't figure it out within the next couple days or something. But anyways, let's get started. So here's a couple of things that I have on my character. Number one, I have a socket at his pelvis. Okay, so I just right clicked here, add socket, didn't rename it, it came in pelvis socket. Alright, so you're gonna need one of those. The other thing you need is a physics asset for the character. Now the main thing that you want to make sure when you do a physics asset is when you're in body mode, select all your bones, everything, and turn off collision. You can re-enable collision between, say, the two forearms and the chest. You can turn that back on. I would turn the mesh rendering mode to wireframe, and I would turn the collision rendering mode to solid. I just find it much easier to see what's going on here. But now you'll see that now this can actually collide with some of these other things here. Things like the feet and whatnot. You can see that mine's pretty dumpy, but if these bodies here, like say these two bodies, collide, they're going to want to do two things. Number one, they're going to want to eject. Okay, it's I don't know what they call that. It's a push, basically. Any overlapping physics bodies will want to eject themselves from each other, and it happens very quickly over the course of usually a single frame, and what causes things to just go zinging off into the out into the universe and seem like they got punted by Superman or something, right? The other thing that's going to want to happen is they're going to want to stay connected. So they're going to want to push apart and stay connected, and it's going to flip-flop every frame, and your character is just going to essentially spaz out. So disable collisions on anything that is interpenetrating or that will interpenetrate. Okay, just make sure that you do that. For the most part, I tend to turn off collisions with everything except for these and maybe these here. And you may want to do the bicep or something like that, so we can turn collision on there. But the important thing is that between these two, it's not purple. Okay, if I click this, you can see it's not colliding with anything, but the forearm will collide. Let's say we want it also to collide with the hip, so we'll turn that on as well. Okay, so then if I simulate this, he reacts relatively decently. Okay, he's okay. I have a couple constraints here and there. This is not a tutorial on how to make the physics asset. Just wanted to run over one or two things, the major things, and the major thing being disable interpenetrating collisions, or you will get a spazzy character. Okay, so once that's done, and you've got your physics asset, and of course you need to set the constraints and all that stuff. You do need the pelvis socket, and we're going to use that to realign everything back. So the first thing that we do is on begin play, we just initialize the capsule here. Now that is for this method here, because this method I'm actually setting the capsule components radius and half height after I simulate it, and I needed to store this. So actually, forget this, we don't use this at all for this particular method that I'm going to show. So I just threw out a key here for G. What I'm doing is some of this stuff is from tests, but I'm just going to keep it in here anyway because it's not hurting anything. I guarantee that the gravity gets enabled, okay, just in case for some reason some other source or some other aspect of the game turned the gravity on him off, okay, which I actually ended up doing. Now I run a closed gate here, but I'm going to show you guys what that means in a second. What I do here is, the reason I have bone index is because of the two different methods that I was trying. Okay, so we can semi-ignore this. However, what's important here is that we do have bone index as an integer, and I'm using that as the point of what I am simulating here, okay, because I do get bone name, I use bone index, and then we do these methods here. First we set the simulation to be on, then we set the weight of the simulation, okay. So I am storing this, but again, you can't have two methods working with, because this method, you'll notice that this method actually sets the bone index to 1. Now bone index of 1 is actually the pelvis, okay. Bone index of 0 is actually the root. Now when you set the root to simulate physics, what will happen if I show collision? I always hit console more than once. Let me find a spot where we can see the collision kind of easy. Let's say right here. Okay, I'm going to run forward and I'm going to ragdoll. Notice the collision stayed behind, okay? When I let go, you'll see that the collision moves to him, okay? The camera switches what it's attached to go to the mesh, and the collision object, the capsule, stays behind. Now what you should probably do, which I haven't done, is because if I'm in this state and another player comes running by or something comes flinging by, it's going to hit that capsule. It will hit that capsule right now. When I let go, that would make sense that it hits it, but it wouldn't make sense that it hits the capsule now, right? Nothing should hit that, but it will. So that's a thing that you should probably add. Number one, you need to turn off gravity, I would say, on it, and you need to turn off collision on it. And then when you let go, you turn everything back on. Okay. So the first thing we do is we get the player controller and we set ignore move input. We don't set ignore input because we still want to move the camera around. We just ignore move input. Now there is a problem. If I ragdoll and I hit the space bar, you can't see it. Show collision here. God damn it, I gotta stop hitting that more than once. If I ragdoll and I hit the space bar, you can see that the collision cylinder still can jump. Okay, so it's another bug with this method that should be addressed. Okay, so you would want to have something way over here on jump to test whether or not he's faking death, whether or not he's feigning death. Okay, it's not that big of a deal for getting everything working. That's a guaranteed going to work. That's why I didn't really worry about it. Okay, so after we basically set some stuff, we set the ragdoll weight, which is a float value, we set that to 1. We set the bone index because we're going to want to simulate everything below the root in this case. And we're going to set the weight to 1 so that when we hit the button, the character goes into full simulation because the weights are from 0 to 1. Okay, it's a normalized weight. The first thing we do is we tell the simulation to actually start. Okay. The next thing we do is we tell it basically the same exact thing, except it's got the word weight at the back of it. Okay, so we tell it to go ahead and take the mesh, set all bodies below physics blend weight. So everything below 0, which is from the root, will get a value of 1. This is what causes him to go into ragdoll and detach from his collision capsule. Then we take the camera boom and we attach that to the pelvis socket, keeping the relative offset. We do that pretty much immediately after we set the physics state. Okay, he hasn't even had a chance to move yet when this happens. Okay, so it's going to stay in this state as long as I'm held the button down, which is actually quite tiring trying to move everything around and still hold the G key. I should switch these from F to G, but that's kind of a side thing. What you could and should probably do is make it so that when you press it, it sets a variable is feigned to true, does all this stuff, and when you hit it again it sets it to false and reverses everything instead of holding and releasing. Okay, but that's again a guaranteed working thing. It's just a matter of preference. In this case I wanted to get it working. Okay, so when we release the key, this is where all the craziness happens, because this is the hard part. This part right here is just totally simple. There's nothing to it. You basically say, hey, simulate the physics. When you're going back, though, this is where everything starts falling apart and getting real frustrating. So the first thing I do is I go ahead and I say, okay, stop ignoring input. Go ahead and start being able to move right away. Let's disable the gravity on the mesh, okay? Because I don't want it falling through anymore. You got to remember that the mesh is attached to the collision cylinder, right? The capsule component here. So we don't really need it to be doing anything. It's just literally locked onto this. This capsule component is what is controlling the character. Okay, so then what we do is we get the mesh's pelvis location and we add 192 to it, which is twice the capsule half height. Okay, which is actually a little bit higher. So basically it says, hey, where is the character's pelvis in the world? Find that, and then in the Z just go ahead and add a little bit more to that and set the capsule component to that. Then what I do is I run a return transform, and that's over here. And what this does is after it moves the capsule over, it basically takes okay, so the guy's ass is on the ground, right, sitting somewhere. When I get up, I want to get up from that point, right? So there's two things that need to happen. First, I need to move my capsule, which is basically me, which is what I'm controlling. I need to move it to hover over that position. Then I need to move the mesh to the capsule. So capsule to the mesh, then mesh to the capsule. Seems a little weird, but it is necessary. So basically what we do here is we take the capsule's world transform. This is, remember, this is after the capsule has now been shifted to hover above the pelvis. Okay, we break that open, and what we do here is we add these values. Now, where did I get these values? These values are actually right here, from where the mesh is located, because remember, the capsule is located at world 000. It's actually the root of my scene here. It's the root object, so it actually cannot be moved. Okay, you don't even get any transforms on it. You notice we only have scale, we have no rotation, we have nothing, because this is the actor. Okay, so it's world 0, so remember that. So the mesh is positioned, and it's also a child of here, in relation to the capsule, which is these values here, 000856. 000856. Okay, I just copied and pasted these values. The Z is -97, Z is -97. Rotation, you'll notice here, if you hover over, now this is XYZ, but if you hover over it, it will tell you this is yaw, this is pitch, and this is roll. Okay, so I have a 270 degrees in the yaw. So I take the rotation of the transform from the capsule, break it open, add 270 to the yaw, reapply it, okay, and then I make that into a final transform, and then I set the mesh's transform to that. Okay, so that returns the mesh to this position here, okay, including rotation and everything. So after we do that, we then have to attach the mesh back to the capsule. The reason we have to do that is because the instant that the mesh simulates physics, it detaches from the capsule. If you fail to do this, the character will return to where you tell it to go, but it will no longer, it will sit there in space and it will never move with your character ever again. You need to reattach it to the capsule. Keep world position is the one we want. If you use keep relative offset, the mesh will be way off to the side and spin around anytime you take a turn. If you snap to target, it's going to move it to 0, 0, 0. Okay, it will basically sink it down into the ground. It will be broken. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to reattach the camera boom back to the capsule component. Now this one we go snap to target because this we want to shift back to its original position. Okay, then what I do is I open a gate. Now the gate is the actual return from Ragdoll. Here is the gate. We have tick piped in. We don't want this to run unless we're telling it to go. So I have two events here, one for open gate, one for close gate. Okay, so open the gate allows tick to happen, close gate just cuts it off and it will sit here and it will hit this brick wall. What we do is when the gate is open, we check if our ragdoll weight is equal to 0. If it is not, we f-interp it to 0, okay? Which means we interpolate it to 0 over time based on this speed. Okay, and we use this ragdoll weight. Remember, when I hit the button the first time, I set the weight to 1. Okay, so when I get into here, the weight is 1, so it will interp from 1 down to 0 with a speed of 2. It will set that. New feature here for 4.7, you can actually output from here. It's very nice. And what we will do is we will set all bodies below physics blend weight to this interping value. So it will transition from 1 to 0 over time, effectively causing a blend. Now, I want to make it absolutely totally clear here. This does not work. It should, but it doesn't. If you notice, when I hit the button, he doesn't blend upwards. He snaps to it. It's an instantaneous off. Now, part of the reason for that, I had to make some compromises on this thing, is because when we are done with this blend, actually no, before we're done with the blend, when we attach the mesh to the capsule component, it negates and turns off all physics. Okay? Now, I had to make a compromise here because if I did this after the blend, the mesh would continue to fall through the ground. And I've tried many a different thing. I've been at this since noon. It's 8 p.m. You can see my clock down in the bottom right. I've been at this for a long time trying to get a nice clean blend back to the working state, but nothing seems to really truly be a good solution at this point for me, the things that I've tried. Okay, when I set the when I wait for the blend to finish before I reattach, because again, this just turns physics off completely, puts the mesh excuse me, in a completely snapped back version, okay, of itself. If I do that after this, meaning when it comes out of true, I used to have it here, the mesh continually sinks into the ground while it's trying to do the blend. So I tried turning off the gravity, which is why you see gravity. Okay, I tried constantly running this over tick. Excuse me, I've totally got a grit in my throat. Good golly, Miss Molly. Alright. Excuse me, my voice is going to be a little harsh right now. I think I breathed in a little bit of water. So, reset transform here. I tried running that on the tick. which would constantly keep the mesh in this location. But he was jittering. Gravity was pulling him down, the reset was pulling him back up, and he was constantly jittering and also floating up and down. So it looked like shit. So I got rid of it. Okay? That was a compromise that I had to make. The other thing is that, what was I going to say? Yeah, I don't think there was one other thing. That's why I got gravity here. So I ended up wiping it out. I ended up putting the attach. I moved the attach to here, or to when I release right here. I ended up returning it there so that it just attaches right in the beginning. That way the mesh doesn't go anywhere. Now what that does is that cuts out the blend back. I wish that there was a happy compromise between those two, but I haven't found it yet. Again, I'll probably make an updated video to when I actually finally fix everything. But so what we do is I'm running the code anyway because it doesn't hurt anything. But basically what I do is I say, hey, and you can actually see here that I'm returning the transform in that tick. Okay. If I close the actually, you know what? I'll just show you guys. I'll make a dupe of this guy, and I'll bypass it here. I'll wait until I'm done here before I reattach it. Okay? Again, on false I need to run it as well. I'll show you what happens. So I ragged on. When I let go, you can see I get a better blend, but look what he's doing. He's sinking and he's like moving up and down, and now he's set, but he's off. Okay, I ragdoll, I let him go. See all that jittering and shit? I have to, that's why I made that compromise. I couldn't get rid of that. So I cut this out and just said, okay, fuck it. Excuse my French, but that's basically, sometimes you gotta do that. And I run the attach here instead. Okay, so what I did was I added that little extra boost here when you return the when you return it back to move the capsule back. So it kind of looks like he jumps up. So I felt it was a decent compromise. So it kind of seems like he jumped up. You know, I know it's snappy. I know it looks like shit, but I don't know what else to do. I just don't. If you guys know, if you guys got a really clean version working, please let me know. I will update the video, and I will credit you. Okay, so after we do the interp, we are constantly checking if we're hitting 0. So once this is done, we'll come out here and we'll say true. We will turn off the simulation, set all bodies below simulate physics to off. Okay, we're running the same thing here, bone index. Okay. We then, after we're done here, check if the bone index was 0, because remember I have two methods. One uses bone index 1, one uses bone index 0, because I tried blending from different spots, okay, to try to get a, you know, see if I could get the best of both worlds, and just try two methods here. We go ahead and we re-enable the gravity and we close the gate. Now closing the gate just simply turns off the tick. Okay, that's all that does. And that's basically all it does. That's all we do. That's basically all we do. Now the other method up here works good in one respect, but absolutely ridiculously bad in another. Now there's a bug, and I don't know what is going on. That's when I hit the F key. Now watch this. When I hit the F key, look at the character. He's totally stock. But when I get up, I'm fine. Okay? He doesn't ragdoll. He doesn't ragdoll until the collision cylinder gets put to sleep. Okay? And at which point he's all glitched into the ground, so his ragdoll goes crazy. Here. He's got the turbo dick thrusts going on. Okay? This would be the method that I would think would be the best method to keep him attached to the collision cylinder. Okay? Because the other thing that works on this is the blend works properly. Okay? You can see that he blends in and out. Hey, Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? I just need another guy standing or laying in front of him, right? Walk, walk, walk. So as soon as I move, that's fixed. So this method would work if that didn't happen. Okay, if he ragdolled the instant that I hit the button, this would work perfect. This would be an excellent method right here. So again, I immediately closed the gate, because if this is still interping, when I say if I ragdoll and then let it go and then ragdoll again really fast, if this is still interping, this is going to interfere with the weights. Okay, so I close the gate just to make sure that I shut that off. Not only do I close the gate, but I turn the weight back to 1. Now in this case, remember, index is going to be 1, which again, if you look here, index 1 will actually be starting the simulation from the pelvis. Okay, so the root will stay attached to the collision cylinder. Again, set the ignore move input. Again, start the simulation. This time it is bone index 1 starting at the pelvis, and then we tell it to set it to a weight, which will be 1. Okay, then this is where the dog shit happens. Let me show you something interesting. I'm going to delay this by 1 second. I think this is a bug. Watch how fast he goes into ragdoll. Instant. But he freezes when it kicks back in. For some weird ass reason, as long as this is simulating, this cannot. Now I don't know why. Now this is where I took into account the capsule. Okay, on begin play I save the capsule radius and the capsule half height, because you need to set that because now this is simulating and everything's attached to it. I needed to turn it into a relatively small sphere. Okay, so we start the physics and then we shrink the capsule component. When we let go, okay, we simply reset the pitch and the yaw back to 0. We keep, or the pitch and the roll back to 0, because those can actually change during the ragdoll. Okay, and we set that rotation here. Okay, we set the capsule radius and the half height back to their original values, which were stored on begin play. We turn off physics, we turn on input, we open the gate, which once again allows for the F interp. Okay, we'll be off of bone index 1 and below. Now in this case, remember, this is why I did this. I don't want to do the return transform if I'm using method number 2, because if I am using method number 2, it is already, the mesh is already transformed to the cylinder because I never detached it. Okay, I didn't set the root to simulate, which doesn't detach it from its parent. Okay, so the pelvis is what's simulating. So that's why I don't need this if my bone index is 1, and the only way my bone index is 1 is using this method number 2 up here. Okay, so it's the same thing. We do the interp back on the ragdoll weight, wagdoll rate. Okay, same, set all bodies, and when this is finished, okay, when this is finished, we come up here, we go ahead and we turn off the simulation. We actually set it to off, and again we check if index is 0. If it is, we re-enable the gravity because I have that being messed with. If not, just go ahead and re-close the gate, because again we want to stop the tick. We don't need that anymore. So that's what method number 1 works. And like I said, if this connection right here didn't glitch the shit out, this would be a relatively decent method. Now there's 2 things to note about it too. Number 1, this is a much better 2 ragdoll. Okay, when I hit G, the first method I showed you guys is just a really nice method of ragdoll. You see how very nice that was. Okay, it's just a perfect transition to ragdoll. The other method, the second method, not only does it glitch by freezing him for some weird reason, but you'll notice that I think I just crashed it. I just crashed it. Yeah, I crashed it. I'm not going to send anything. anything. It's nothing anybody can do about that. But like I said, yeah, so there's problems with both. One method gives you a nice to ragdoll, the other method gives you a nice from ragdoll. I really am struggling to find the connection between them that will give me the right combo of stuff to get it all back. You know, it's just tough. It's tough. So let's see if that crashes again. Do you see how his hip, even during the part where he is ragdolling, his hip is just like, just seems really frozen in space. See that? It's just, and then when I use the method, you know, the final method that I'm using, it's just perfect, you know? No real glitches. The only issue is when I'm done ragdolling, I get kind of that snappy, jumpy thing. Now we could interp the collision back to the mesh. You could run an animation of the character getting up, which basically what you would want to do is make a determination on his chest, whether or not the chest is face down or face up, and play two different animations. That would be what I would do. If I was going to bother with it, I would do it right, which in this case the chest is facing down. So I would get the forward vector of that and I would compare that to the up vector of the world, right? And I would say, hey, if that's down, then play the animation of him getting up off his belly. If that's facing, let's see if I can even get him to fall backwards. If that's facing up, like so, then I would say play the one of him getting up off his back. If you weren't going to do that, what you would want to do is you would want to de-blend the physics from this, whatever pose he ends up in. Okay, because remember, it can be totally freaking random what he can end up in. He could be on his side, he could be on his back. I mean, he could be in any pose, basically. If he gets kicked around by stuff, too, it's another story. If he's on a weird surface. Okay? Assuming that you know your character, now, you know, if you're just killing your character and he's dead, I mean, you don't have to worry about any of this, right? But if at any point you wanted to say, hey, punch the character and knock him out for a couple seconds, like, oh, you know, it's a boxing game, takes a bunch of hits, pow, 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 and then, oh, you know, he gets knocked down, and then starts to want to get up. If this was like an EA quality boxing game or something like that, or, you know, Activision, or, you know, some kind of really high quality sports game or something like that, or even a, you know, if you just want to have good quality in whatever game you're making, but you know, a game where there's like two really large characters on the screen, where the two characters themselves and their animations is a absolute major focus of the game, and not a bunch of characters that are running around the screen that you would focus on otherwise, then you would want to really, you know, be really adamant about how you wanted to treat him getting up. You know, it's a very important thing, you know, that people see that look as good as possible. So like in this case, this is kind of a tough one right here, right? Which way is he facing? You know, is that chest facing up or down? It's practically sideways. So in this case, you may want to take a, you know, you may want to figure out which way he's facing from the pelvis as opposed to the chest. You know, you could run a simple trace off of his ass and off of his dick and see if, okay, well, if his ass hits the ground, well, you know, if that detects a surface, then he's on his back, and if his dick detects a surface, then he's really happy. He's on his front, you know. And in this case, he'd get up, you know, push himself up like I do a push-up, and then, you know, pull his legs in. In the case of on his back, I would, you know, probably sit up first, and then, you know, prop himself up. That kind of thing. I mean, there's lots of stuff you can do. I can actually take him in and out of ragdoll, which is kind of weird. And this is where you can really see the jump and the difference, where things don't exactly. It's also, I'm slowing down time too, in essence, because I'm constantly popping him up a little bit. So you may want to set a delay. I mean, I would definitely set a delay on how often you could do this skill. You can see if it's actually kind of hurting my eyes after a while. So you'd say, hey, you can only ragdoll like every 1 minute or something. You have a cooldown. on your skill, you know? Pop, and everything goes pop. Oh, and then I go pop. So that's about it. Hopefully you guys found that interesting. It's fun, but I really wish that I could figure out the happy medium between the two methods. Now, the first method is definitely too broken to use. The second method is not too broken to use. Even in a final product, I would say it's semi-acceptable. I would definitely tune this value here to probably make it so that the collision cylinder ended up in the exact right spot instead of just popped up a little bit. But again, this right here is what kills this right here from working, and I really kind of don't know why that happens. I've tried unwelding the simulated bodies, didn't do any good. It's not the camera boom one, by the way. It's the this one here. If you don't hit weld simulate bodies, I believe it doesn't actually return back properly. Okay, you can see that I'm all like glitchy. You can see that the blend works, by the way, when I do that. But during the interp back, even though I've attached him, he's jittery. He's jitterbug. See how the blend works? You can see his hands come back up and everything. Right? It does blend, but look what his body's doing. Now this is during the jittering. I mean during the interp. So you could maybe find a happy medium there by, say, speeding that up. Okay, but his feet are his feet are totally in the ground. Whereas before I started, his feet are nice here. As soon as I let go, during that interp, he's glitchy. I almost feel like he's at the wrong rotation too. So what you could do is, when you finally close this gate, do a one more return transform. Okay, now what I would do here is I'm going to turn that off. Actually, I'll turn that off there. So without the jitter, without the trying to fix it, I'll show you guys what was happening. That. During the interp, he was doing this shit. So you can see what's going on with the blend. Now, I feel like that's a bug. So he ragdolls nicely, but he does this shit until he snaps back into place. So my fix was to continue returning him to the transform. So the physics is wanting to glitch him out all over the place, but I, every tick, am forcing him back into position. Okay? By basically getting the capsule component wherever it is, getting his transform, breaking it, setting the offsets, and making it, and then setting his transform. I really don't know what this does. I don't know what this means. I have to look this up. Sweep. I'm assuming it's checking around for collision. I thought that that's what that meant. Swept collision. So yeah, I mean, like if I don't, like you saw what happened if I don't do this. He's like a fucking deflating balloon, and I don't know why that's happening. It's only happening while this is interping, and even though he is attached. Right? He's attached, but this is still happening. It's still deflating him all over the room. And if you slow this down, he does it for ages. It's at the instant that the ragdoll weight is, if the ragdoll weight is anything in between 0 and 1, he's spazzing around the room like a deflating balloon. He's going crazy. And I don't know how to fix that. I don't know why it does that, but it does it to me all the time. So like I said, my fix for that was to force his transform per tick as long as this was interping. Okay? But it seems that the force of whatever's happening is so strong that I get this effect. Okay? It totally glitches out, and then he snaps. Because he's wanting to fart around the room, you know, like I said, like a balloon is the best analogy, is what he looks like is happening. And that make transform is interjecting it, you know, every frame, but also every frame he's wanting to be spazzed out. So it's getting this jitter, syncing, and unsyncing effect. You can see his rotations changes and everything. So yeah, I'm not real sure what to do there, you know? I'm just not sure. I'm really not. That's the only thing I could think of, was to speed this up. I mean, I when it was, you know, a nice, felt like a good speed blend, he's jittering and spazzing for way too long. Just way too long. See, I set him the one time, so it happens fast. See, and then it was this here, the weld simulated bodies. Turn that on, and I immediately lose all of my simulated bodies, get set back instantaneously, but I don't get any of the jitter. But I get a pretty nasty camera leap. In fact, if I span this fast enough, I might even be able to get up really high in the air. So that's a problem. But that could be easily solved by simply saying, start, you know, just set a timer. You know, if you feigned death, then, you know, start a timer, say feigned has been used, and then at the end of the timer, feigned has not been used, and you can come here and you can do it. And you could put it in the UI even, you know, as a skill, you know. And then they could upgrade it, so that speeds up over time. But you never really want the upgrade speed on that to be so that they could do it this fast, right? Because it glitches. But this isn't something that I would suggest anybody use as is out the box. It's very important that some of the things get fixed. Number one, I want to figure out the fix here. Number two, I think the real way to do it would be to play an animation. Run an anim montage. Figure out which way the character is facing. Is he on his back? Is he on his stomach? Play the appropriate animation. Then snap the bodies back. Don't even blend. You would do the blend to that and to the start of that animation. Then you would turn off the simulation. Play the animation. Then you would release the character to be able to have inputs again. That would be the optimal, correct method of doing this. If anybody, like I said, if anybody has anything to offer in terms of advice, or have done this and know what I'm doing officially wrong, what I missed and failed to look at, please let me know. And like I said, I'll credit you, and I will update the video for everybody. So this is HitPause. Thanks for watching, and one more jump through the boxes, I think. Am I gonna clear it? No. There we go. Ragdoll on, ragdoll off. total feign death. And again, the last thing I wanted to say before I end this is you can easily say, hey, is feigned, turns that, we have a variable here, so it can actually trick AI. Right? Other players, it wouldn't trick them, right? But maybe they won't shoot you while you're on the ground, right? They've got that in several games. But if you were playing against AI, you could give it a % chance of succeeding, basically. You hit the button, you ragdoll every time, but there should be a chance as to whether or not the enemy can detect if it worked. And maybe even say, when the enemy sees you, if your character's still moving too fast, they don't fall for it. Right? Check one of the bones and check the linear velocity of like the chest bone or something. If that's still in fast movement when he actually sees you, then maybe he doesn't fall for it. That's probably a little too complex. I would just say, hey, when he sees you, if you're feigned, just run a 60-40, 30-20, 50-50, 90-10, whatever kind of ratio check you want to run, weighted check, to determine whether or not he's going to fall for it. If he doesn't fall for it, you start shooting at your ass. And then you got to get up and run. And if it takes you a moment to play an animation before you can actually get up and run, it's a risky maneuver to actually run the feigned death. Good balancing right there, I think, and that would be for a pretty fun game. So this is HipHoz signing off. Thanks for watching.